I was sitting at the head table during our 36th wedding anniversary party when I heard my husband tell his mother something in Italian that made my hands go cold around my champagne glass. They were standing just 10 feet away, speaking rapidly, confidently, the way people do when they think no one else can understand them. My husband Marco gestured toward me and laughed. His mother, Lucia, touched his arm and said something back. I caught every word, every single syllable. Because for 36 years, since the day I married into this Italian family, I had been learning their language in secret. I understood everything they had ever said about me. And tonight, at our anniversary party in front of 80 guests, I finally heard the truth I had suspected but never wanted to believe. Let me back up. I met Marco Benedetti in the autumn of 1988 at a charity fundraiser in Boston. I was 28 years old, working as a paralegal at a small law firm in the North End. Marco was 32, charming, with dark eyes and an accent that made everything he said sound romantic. He had moved to Boston from Naples when he was 18 to help his mother run her restaurant, a little place called Lucia's Kitchen that had become an institution in the neighborhood. His father had died young, and Marco was the devoted son, the protector, the one who made sure his mother never wanted for anything. I fell hard and fast. We were married within a year, and I moved into the apartment above the restaurant where Marco had lived his whole American life. The walls smelled like garlic and tomato sauce, and Lucia was there every day, cooking, managing, running the business that had been her whole world since she immigrated in 1970. From the beginning, Lucia spoke to Marco in Italian, always Italian. When I entered a room, she would pause mid-sentence, smile at me with cool politeness, then continue talking to her son in rapid Italian. I would stand there, trying to smile, trying to be included, but feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. Marco would translate sometimes, but only the basics. She says the bread looks good today. She wants to know if you like the pasta. Never the full conversations. Never the real meaning behind their glances and their lowered voices. I asked Marco, in those early months, if he could speak English when I was around. He kissed my forehead and told me not to worry. It's just easier for her, he said. You know how old people are with language. She's more comfortable in Italian. I accepted it. I wanted to be understanding. I wanted to be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law. But something inside me, some instinct I couldn't name, told me I needed to know what they were saying. So I started learning Italian. I bought a used Italian-English dictionary from a bookstore in Cambridge. I checked out language-learning cassette tapes from the public library and listened to them on my Walkman during my lunch breaks. I practiced pronunciation in my car on my way to work. I watched Italian films with English subtitles at the Brattle Theater, then went back and watched them again, trying to catch words I recognized. I was careful. I never let Marco see my materials. I never practiced around him. When Lucia and Marco spoke Italian in front of me, I kept my face blank, neutral, as if I understood nothing. It took me 3 years before I could follow a basic conversation, 5 years before I could understand most of what they said. By year 10, I was fluent. By year 20, I could catch every idiom, every colloquialism, every subtle insult disguised as concern. And I heard everything. I heard Lucia tell Marco 3 months after our wedding that I was too thin, too American, too cold. Non sarà una buona moglie, she said. She will not be a good wife. I heard Marco agree. I was standing right there, smiling, holding a plate of her homemade ravioli. I heard her ask him, 2 years into our marriage, why I wasn't pregnant yet. Forse è difettosa, she said. Maybe she is defective. Marco told her to be patient, but he didn't defend me. He never defended me. When we started trying to have children, really trying, with doctors and specialists and tests, Lucia's comments became sharper. I heard her tell Marco that I was probably being punished by God for something, that American women didn't know how to be mothers, that she should find him a nice Italian girl from the old neighborhood who could give him the family he deserved. Marco would laugh it off, but I heard the frustration in his voice, too, as if my inability to conceive was a personal failing that embarrassed him. We tried for 8 years. Fertility treatments, hormones, procedures that left me hollow and hopeless. Every month that ended in disappointment was another month of Lucia's comments in Italian, another month of Marco's strained silences. Finally, the doctors told us it wasn't going to happen. Something about my eggs, my age, my body just not cooperating. I was 36 years old, and I felt like I had failed the only test that mattered to my husband and his mother. Lucia said, the day after we got the final news from the fertility specialist, sapevo che era inutile. I knew she was useless. She said it right in front of me, in the restaurant kitchen, while I was helping prep vegetables. Marco was across the room, and he nodded. He just nodded. I kept learning Italian. I kept pretending I didn't understand, because by then, I realized that my secret knowledge was the only power I had. If they knew I understood, they would switch tactics. They would hide their truth in English lies. But if I stayed silent, stayed ignorant in their eyes, I could hear everything. I could know exactly what they thought of me, exactly what they were planning, exactly how little they valued me. The years passed. I stopped working when we decided to try for a baby, and I never went back. Marco said there was no need, the restaurant was doing well, and he made enough for both of us. Lucia agreed. She told him, in Italian, that it was better if I stayed home. That way I wouldn't embarrass them with my American work habits. That way I could focus on being a wife, even if I couldn't be a mother. I became the woman who set the table, who cleaned the apartment, who smiled at Marco's cousins and aunts and uncles during Sunday dinners. I became invisible. I had no bank account in my own name, Marco said. It was easier to have everything joint, and I trusted him. I had no credit cards, no savings, no financial identity outside of my marriage. Marco handled everything. He gave me cash when I needed it for groceries or household supplies, but I had to ask every time. I heard Lucia tell him, when I was 45, that I was lucky to have him, that no other man would have stayed with a barren wife, that he was a saint for putting up with me. Marco told her he knew. He told her he had sacrificed his chance at a family to honor his marriage vows. He told her I should be grateful. I was standing in the doorway when he said it. They didn't see me. I went back to the bedroom and cried into my pillow so they wouldn't hear me, but I stayed. Because where would I go? I had no money, no job, no career after 17 years out of the workforce. I had no children, no purpose beyond being Marco's wife and Lucia's daughter-in-law. I convinced myself that this was just how marriage was, that everyone made sacrifices, that I was being too sensitive, too American, too ungrateful for the life Marco had given me. Then came our 36th wedding anniversary. Marco wanted to celebrate big. He rented out a private room at a hotel in the Back Bay, invited everyone, family, friends from the restaurant, people from the neighborhood. It was supposed to be a celebration of our enduring love, our commitment, our lifetime together. I wore a navy dress that Lucia said made me look washed out. I smiled through the cocktail hour. I thanked people for coming. I pretended everything was fine. Lucia arrived late, as she always did, making an entrance. She wore a wine-colored dress and enough gold jewelry to finance a small country. She kissed Marco on both cheeks and barely glanced at me. Then she pulled him aside, near the bar, and started talking to him in Italian. I was across the room, talking to Marco's cousin about her daughter's college plans, but I was listening. I was always listening. Lucia said, "Have you talked to the lawyer yet about the transfer?" Marco said, "Next week. He's drawing up the papers." "And Margaret has no idea?" "None. She never asks about the restaurant. She doesn't even know I put the building in my name 5 years ago." Lucia laughed, a sharp sound. "When are you going to tell her?" "After the transfer goes through, after it's all official. Then I'll explain that we're selling. She'll be upset. She'll get over it. What's she going to do? She has nothing without me. No job, no money, no skills. She'll accept it because she has to." I felt the room tilt. I gripped my champagne glass tighter. Lucia continued, "And you're sure about the amount?" "The buyer is offering $2.8 million for the building and the business. After we pay off the mortgage, we're looking at about $2 million profit." "And her share?" Marco laughed. "What share? The restaurant is mine. The building is in my name. She's not on any of the paperwork. I've made sure of that over the years. She'll get whatever I decide to give her from the proceeds. If I'm feeling generous, maybe $100,000. Enough to keep her quiet." Lucia said something in a lower voice that I couldn't quite catch, but I heard Marco's response clearly. She's been a decent wife, even if she couldn't give me children. I'll take care of her. But the money is mine. I built that business with you. She just lived off it. I excused myself from the conversation with Marco's cousin. I walked to the bathroom on legs that didn't feel attached to my body. I locked myself in a stall and pressed my hands against the cold metal walls. My mind was racing, rewiring everything I thought I knew about my life. The restaurant, Lucia's kitchen. I had always assumed it was Lucia's, that she owned it, that Marco just managed it. But Marco had been saying my restaurant for years now, hadn't he? I had thought it was just pride, just his way of claiming ownership over his work. I hadn't realized he meant it literally. And the building, when had he put the building in his name? 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Marco had convinced me to sign a bunch of papers during tax season. He said it was just routine paperwork, refinancing, something about better rates. I had signed without reading, trusting him completely. He was my husband. Why wouldn't I trust him? I realized, standing in that bathroom stall at my own anniversary party, that I had been systematically erased from my own life. I had no job, no income, no assets in my name, no bank account, no credit, no paper trail of existence beyond being Mrs. Marco Benedetti. And now, after 36 years of marriage, Marco was planning to sell everything and give me what he decided I deserved pocket change compared to what we had built together. Because we had built it together. I might not have worked in the restaurant, but I had given up my career to support his. I had hosted countless dinners, managed the household, played the perfect wife while he and Lucia ran the business. Under Massachusetts law, I was entitled to half of everything. But if I didn't know about the sale, if I didn't know about the building transfer, if I had no documentation of my contributions or even my own financial existence, how could I fight for what was mine? I washed my hands and looked at myself in the mirror. I was 64 years old. My hair was gray, cut in a practical bob. My face showed every year I had spent smiling when I wanted to cry. I looked like exactly what Marco and Lucia thought I was, a used-up wife with nowhere to go and no power to change anything. But they didn't know I spoke Italian. They didn't know I had understood every conversation, every insult, every plan they had made over 36 years. And they definitely didn't know that I had spent 20 years working as a paralegal, that I understood legal documents and property transfers and marital assets. I went back to the party. I smiled. I thanked people for coming. I cut the anniversary cake with Marco while everyone applauded. I posed for photos. I played the role of the happy wife for 3 more hours. And then I went home and started planning. The next morning, I told Marco I was going to visit my sister in New Hampshire for a few days. I didn't have a sister, but Marco barely knew anything about my family. They had drifted away over the years, tired of Lucia's coldness and Marco's disinterest. He didn't question it. He seemed relieved to have me gone. Instead, I went to a lawyer's office in downtown Boston. Her name was Patricia Morrison, and she specialized in divorce cases involving complex assets and financial abuse. I had found her through an old colleague from my paralegal days who I had looked up on Facebook. I called from a payphone. I didn't trust that Marco wouldn't check my cell phone records. Patricia was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and direct. I sat in her office and told her everything. The 36 years of marriage, the no children, the lack of financial independence, the secret language learning, the conversation I had overheard about the sale. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. "Margaret, you understand that what your husband has done is called financial abuse?" "I'm starting to." "It's also potentially fraudulent transfer. If he moved assets into his name only, especially a marital asset, like a business you indirectly supported, that's something we can challenge. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state. You're entitled to a fair share of all marital assets, regardless of whose name they're in." "But I signed papers 5 years ago. I don't even remember what they said." "Did you have independent legal counsel when you signed?" "No. Marco just put them in front of me and told me where to sign." Patricia made a note. "That's helpful. We can argue you signed under pressure or without full disclosure. But first, We need documentation. Do you have access to financial records? Tax returns? Property deeds? Marco keeps everything in his office at the restaurant. But I can get in there. He doesn't lock it. Get me whatever you can find. Bank statements, tax returns from the last 7 years, any documents related to the restaurant or the building. Don't take the originals, photograph them with your phone if you can. And do it soon, before the sale goes through. I went back to the apartment above the restaurant. Marco was downstairs working the lunch shift. Lucia was in the kitchen. I went into Marco's office, a small room off the living room, where he kept his desk and filing cabinets. I found everything. Decades of tax returns showing the restaurant's income, showing that the business was profitable, showing that it was growing. Property records for the building, transferred into Marco's name alone in 2019. Mortgage statements showing the loan was almost paid off. Bank statements for accounts I didn't know existed, accounts with hundreds of thousands of dollars, accounts that funded Marco's lifestyle while I got a cash allowance like a child. I photographed everything with my phone. I found the paperwork I had signed 5 years ago, a quitclaim deed, giving up any ownership interest I might have had in the property. I found emails between Marco and the buyer, negotiating the sale price, discussing closing dates. I found a contract, already signed, promising to sell the restaurant and building for $2.8 million, with closing scheduled for 6 weeks away. I took photos of it all. Then I put everything back exactly where I found it and went back to Patricia's office. She reviewed the evidence over the next 2 days. Then she called me in. "Margaret, we have a strong case. Very strong. The quitclaim deed is likely voidable because you signed it without independent counsel and without full disclosure of what you were signing. The sale contract is interesting. Marco can't sell property that's a marital asset without your consent. We can challenge the sale, or we can negotiate with him now before it goes through. What would you recommend?" "I'd recommend filing for divorce immediately and getting an injunction to stop the sale until the divorce is settled. That gives you leverage. He'll have to negotiate with you because the buyer won't wait forever. And if he wants the sale to go through, he'll have to give you what you're entitled to. Which is, in my opinion, half of everything. The restaurant, the building, the proceeds from any sale. We're talking about $1 million or more, Margaret. Plus spousal support, given the length of the marriage and your lack of income." I thought about Marco's face when he learned I was challenging him. I thought about Lucia's fury. I thought about how I had spent 36 years being told I was useless, barren, lucky to be tolerated. "Do it," I said. "File the papers." Patricia filed for divorce 2 days later. She also filed an emergency motion to stop the sale, arguing that the property was a marital asset and couldn't be sold without my consent. The motion was granted. The sale was frozen. Marco showed up at Patricia's office 3 days after he was served. He was furious, red-faced, shouting. Patricia had security escort him out. Then she called his lawyer and set up a proper meeting. I didn't attend the first few negotiations. Patricia said it was better if I stayed away, let her handle the legal strategy. But Marco wasn't cooperating. He was claiming the restaurant was his separate property, that I had signed away my rights, that I was entitled to nothing. His lawyer was aggressive, threatening to drag the case out for years. So Patricia suggested I attend the next meeting. She said sometimes it helped to put a human face on the case, to remind everyone that this wasn't just about money, it was about a person's life. We met in a conference room at Patricia's office. Marco was there with his lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Lucia came too, even though she wasn't a party to the divorce. She sat next to Marco, glaring at me as if I had committed a crime. Patricia laid out our position. Half the value of the restaurant and building, plus spousal support, plus my legal fees. Marco's lawyer countered with an insultingly low offer, $200,000, total and no support. I sat quietly, my hands folded on the table. Marco wouldn't look at me. Lucia was muttering something under her breath. In Italian, she said, "Non può vincere, è troppo stupida." She can't win, she's too stupid. Marco said, in Italian, "This is a waste of time. She'll take what we offer because she has no choice." Lucia said, "Maybe if you scare her a little. Remind her that she'll have nothing if this goes to trial. Remind her that judges don't like bitter wives." I took a breath. Then I said, in perfect Italian, Non ho bisogno di essere spaventata. E I giudici non amano I mariti che rubano. I don't need to be scared. And judges don't like husbands who steal. The room went dead silent. Marco's face went white, then red. Lucia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Marco's lawyer looked confused, glancing between us. I switched to English, looking directly at Marco. I have understood every word you and your mother have said about me for 36 years. Every insult, every lie, every plan. I know about the building transfer. I know about the accounts I'm not on. I know exactly how you've hidden assets and controlled me financially, and I have evidence of all of it. Marco found his voice. You speak Italian? Fluently. For decades. Your mother called me defective, useless, a burden. You agreed. You told her I should be grateful to have you, that no one else would want a barren woman. You said I had nothing without you. I leaned forward. You were wrong. Lucia started shouting in Italian, calling me names I won't repeat. Marco tried to calm her down, but she was in full fury. Patricia let it go on for about 30 seconds, then she stood. I think we're done here. Margaret, let's go. Gentlemen, Mrs. Benedetti, we'll see you in court. The trial took 8 months. Marco fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. The quitclaim deed was thrown out. The sale contract was voided, the buyer walked away after so many delays. Patricia argued financial abuse, presented all the documentation showing how Marco had systematically excluded me from any financial control, demonstrated that the restaurant's success was built during our marriage with my indirect support. The judge was a woman in her 60s who looked at Marco with open disgust by the end of the trial. She awarded me half of everything. The restaurant, the building, all bank accounts, retirement funds, everything was split 50-50. She also awarded me 3 years of spousal support, generous support, enough for me to live comfortably while I figured out my next chapter. Marco had to buy out my share if he wanted to keep the restaurant. He couldn't afford it. We ended up selling everything to a restaurant group. After all the lawyers and costs, I walked away with $1.1 million. I was 65 years old, divorced, and wealthier than I had ever imagined. I bought a small house in Marblehead, right on the coast. 2 bedrooms, a garden, a view of the ocean from my kitchen window. I bought it with cash, in my name only. I opened my own bank accounts. I got my own credit cards. I hired a financial advisor who helped me invest the remaining money so I would have income for the rest of my life. I also enrolled in Italian literature classes at the community college. After all those years of secret learning, I wanted to study the language openly, proudly. I joined an Italian conversation group. I even took a trip to Italy, Florence, Venice, Rome. I stayed in small hotels and spoke Italian with shopkeepers and restaurant owners. I felt free. Marco and Lucia sold the restaurant building at a loss and moved to a cheaper neighborhood. I heard through the community that Lucia was bitter, telling anyone who would listen that I had stolen her son's livelihood, that I was a vindictive woman who couldn't let go, that I had ruined a good family. I didn't care. I learned something important during those 36 years of silence. Knowledge is power, but only if you use it. I had collected information for decades, understood every cruel word, every dismissive comment, every plan made at my expense. But it wasn't until I was 64 years old, sitting in a bathroom stall at my anniversary party, that I realized I could act on what I knew. I spent most of my life trying to be good enough for people who would never value me. I twisted myself into smaller and smaller shapes, trying to fit into their expectations. I accepted less than I deserved because I believed I had no other choice. I was wrong. I had choices all along. I just had to be brave enough to make them. Now I'm 66. I live alone by the ocean. I have friends, real friends, who value me for who I am. I volunteer at a women's shelter, helping women who are trying to leave abusive relationships, who think they have no money and no options. I tell them my story. I help them understand their rights. I show them that it's never too late to start over. Some mornings I sit on my little porch with coffee, watching the sunrise over the water, and I think about all those years in that apartment above the restaurant. All those years of making myself small, of pretending I didn't understand. I think about the woman I was trying so hard to be enough, to earn love that was never freely given. That woman is gone now. The woman I am today speaks her mind, in English and Italian. She owns her own home, controls her own money, makes her own decisions. She doesn't need anyone's approval to know her worth. Did I waste 36 years in a loveless marriage? Maybe. Or maybe those years taught me exactly what I needed to know, that I am stronger than I thought, smarter than they believed, and deserving of so much more than I was given. Marco never understood why I learned Italian. He thought I was too stupid to even try. But I learned because I needed to know the truth, even when the truth hurt. I learned because somewhere deep inside me, even when I felt powerless, I knew that knowledge would matter someday. And I was right. The restaurant is gone now, replaced by a chain coffee shop. Lucia moved to Florida to live with Marco's cousin. Marco got remarried, a younger woman this time, someone who probably doesn't speak Italian. I hope she's smarter than I was. I hope she asks questions. I hope she demands her own bank account on day one. As for me, I'm learning Spanish now, just for fun, just because I can, just because there's something powerful about understanding more than people think you do, about being underestimated and then exceeding every expectation. I learned that when people think you can't understand them, they reveal their true selves. They say what they really think, what they really want, who they really are underneath the polite smiles and careful English words. And once you know who someone really is, once you understand their truth, you can decide what to do with that knowledge. It took me 36 years, but I finally decided, and that decision gave me my life back. If you're reading this, if you're in a situation where you feel trapped, where you feel like you have no options, where someone has convinced you that you're powerless, please know that you're not. You have more power than you think. Start small. Open a bank account. Save $10. Keep a record. Learn something they don't know you're learning. Build your knowledge, build your resources, build your escape route if you need one. It's never too late. I was 64 when I finally stood up for myself. 64 when I spoke Italian for the first time in front of Marco and his mother, revealing a secret I had kept for more than 3 decades. 65 when I started my new life. If I can do it, you can too. The cage you think you're in might have a door that's been unlocked all along. You just have to be brave enough to open it. I opened mine, and on the other side, I found myself the real me, the strong me, the me who was there all along, just waiting for permission to exist. I gave myself that permission, and my life finally began.